Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into, well, a really fascinating stack of sources you brought to us. Stuff that really challenges some basic ideas about language.
Right.
We're talking about a theory, suggesting our words, even our sentence structure, might hold these ancient keys to how humanity first, thought and survived.
Mhm.
So our mission today is to unpack this intriguing Odam Tili, or Adam's language theory. It proposes that maybe one language family preserves the original logical flow of human thought better than others.
And what's really fascinating here, I think, is how the theory contrasts the kind of logical patterns we use for planning, for action,
Yeah.
with how different languages actually, well, express those thoughts. We'll definitely be digging into the bold claim that English, surprisingly perhaps, might be considered artificial in this context.
Artificial, wow. Okay, so get ready to maybe rethink everything you thought you knew about sentences, cognitive flow, even the origins of communication itself, all based on the material you shared. Okay,
Yeah.
so building on that, let's unpack this. The sources introduce us to Odam Tili. This theory posits language wasn't just random sounds.
Right.
It emerged from, our primal need to survive, and it mirrored how we naturally think.
Exactly. The core idea, the assertion, is that the earliest human language directly reflected that logical flow of survival thinking.
Yeah.
And according to this theory, Turkic languages, like Uzbek, for instance, still preserve this ancient logic pretty directly.
Right, and this is where it gets really interesting, I found. The sources draw a direct comparison. English versus Turkic languages, specifically word order.
Yes, the syntax.
English uses subject, verb, object, right?
Sure.
SVO, like I go to school.
Mhm.
Simple.
Standard English.
But many Turkic languages, Uzbek included, are subject, object, verb. SOV. So it's men maktabga boraman, literally, I to school go.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, the Odom-Tili theory argues that the Turkic SOV structure is, well, logically correct because it mirrors a natural planning flow. You establish the context, then the target or object, and then the action.
Okay.
Whereas English, with its SVO structure, puts the verb earlier,
Yeah.
which, the theory claims, doesn't directly reflect what we're thinking in that primal planning kind of way.
The sources give a really compelling example for this. Compare, I go to school at 8:30 a.m. in the morning by bus
Okay.
versus the Uzbek. Men ertelab sot 8 yarimda avtobus or kwari maktabga boraman.
Which translates piece by piece as,
I'm morning at 8 half-past bus via school to go.
right, verb at the very end.
Exactly. And the sources present that Uzbek sentence as following a more logical thought progression. First the subject, I, then details like when and how, then the destination school, and only then, finally, the action. Go.
It forces the speaker to lay out the whole plan before committing to the action, linguistically speaking.
Yeah, it really does make you stop and think about how we phrase things. Like you said, if I tried to say, I to school go in English every day, it would sound, well, just wrong. Awkward.
Completely.
But this theory suggests that awkwardness might just be our modern English brains having sort of unlearned and ancient, maybe more natural logic.
That's the provocative idea, yes.
So, okay, if language really did arise from these survival needs, how does that play out in sentence structure? The sources suggest picturing, say, a prehistoric hunting trip.
Right, a practical scenario.
Yeah.
And this brings up a key question. What's the logical sequence for planning something like that?
Sure.
Mentally. The theory proposes it unfolds something like this. First, who? The hunter capable of the task.
Because
The subject.
we're going away.
Second, what, or maybe why?
Mm.
The purpose, getting meat, for example, or the object needed. Third, where? The location for the hunt, the forest, the plains. Fourth, when or how? The time, the method, maybe the route you'll take. And then finally, only once that entire plan is mentally set. Then comes the action, the verb, to go, to hunt, whatever it is.
Ah, so that sequence, subject first, then all the contextual stuff, why, where, when, how, and then the verb.
Precisely. Subject, context, verb. That's the core of the Odom-Tili argument for what they call a natural survival order.
And the sources really hammer home how Turkic languages like Uzbek seem to preserve this full logic perfectly.
Yeah, they give another great example, the Uzbek sentence. Men of Kilgani ormonga ertalab piyoda soyoli orkali boraman.
Which means,
Roughly. I meet to hunt for hunting to the forest in the morning by foot along the river path go.
wow, okay.
See, all those details, the what, why, where, when, how, they all come before the verb boraman, which means go.
So the action is only stated after the entire mental plan is laid out in the sentence.
That's the claim.
Okay, but then, what does this really mean for English? The sources argue English breaks this sequence. Because our verb shows up early. You say, I go, before you've necessarily laid out all the context of where, when, why.
Exactly.
That claim about English being artificial is, well, it's pretty bold.
It is.
Does the theory offer any reason why a language might drift away from the supposed natural survival order? Is it seen as like an evolution or maybe a degradation?
Well, from the Odam Tili perspective presented in these sources, the early verb placement means English doesn't strictly preserve that primal survival logic. So they label English as artificial. Now, it's important not in the sense of being fake or inferior, but artificial specifically because its structure, according to this theory, evolved away from that hypothesized original natural cognitive flow.
So like a deviation from an ancient blueprint for thought.
That's a good way to put it, a departure.
Now, another thing that struck me as really intriguing. The sources also point out this remarkable flexibility within Turkic syntax.
Ah, yes. That's important too.
While the general subject-context-verb order holds strong, the specific order of those context bits, the where, when, how, can apparently shift around quite a bit.
Exactly. It doesn't seem rigidly fixed within that context block.
But it doesn't break the core logic because the verb still stays at the end.
Precisely. Whether you mentally prioritize the when over the where, or vice versa in your planning, you might say, using an English SOV structure for illustration, I to the library to read a book at 5 o'clock by Busco.
Okay.
Or you could say, I for reading a book to the library at 5 o'clock by Busco.
Right, changing the order of why and where.
But the core point remains.
Yeah.
The verb go always comes last. It anchors the action after the full plan, however you internally arrange the details, has been mentally constructed and articulated.
So that flexibility, kind of paradoxically, actually reinforces the theory's claim.
It does. It suggests the structure mirrors the flexibility of real human planning, where we might emphasize different contextual elements first, but the action is the final confirmation.
And moving beyond just sentence structure, the sources briefly touch on something else, this symbolic aspect.
Ah, the letters themselves.
Yeah, the idea that certain letters might carry these ancient inherent symbolic meanings. They use the example maktabga, to school in Uzbek. That brga suffix indicates direction.
Right, a directional marker.
And the Odam Tili theory apparently interprets the G sound letter as meaning head, or maybe destination, and A as direction itself.
That's interesting. It echoes much older ideas, sort of like acrophony, where letters were maybe derived from pictograms representing words starting with that sound.
Like A for Aleph, meaning ox.
Exactly. Though, modern linguistics mostly treats the shapes of the Latin alphabet, for example, as conventional, arbitrary, without direct meaning links like that.
Sure.
But this symbolic interpretation fits beautifully within the Odam Tili framework's worldview, especially applied to Turkic suffixes. It suggests this deeper inherent meaning baked right into the sounds.
Grounding language even further in some kind of primal logic beyond just word order.
Potentially, yes.
So, okay, the big question then. What does, mainstream linguistics make of all this Adams language theory?
Well, mainstream linguistics generally doesn't confirm any single, identifiable Adamic source language for all human languages. That's not really how the field approaches it.
Right, they work with reconstructed proto-languages, don't they?
Exactly. Reconstructed early branches like Proto-Indo-European, or maybe Proto-Altaic, though Altaic itself is debated. These are hypothetical ancestors.
Understood.
However, linguists do broadly acknowledge that SOV subject-object-verb was very likely the original, or at least a very common word order for many ancient language families. Proto-Indo-European is often reconstructed as SOV, for example.
Oh, really? So SOV itself is seen as ancient?
Widely, yes. And it's also understood that word orders naturally shift over time. Languages are dynamic.
Why do they shift?
Oh, various reasons. Language contact, internal pressures for simplification, maybe ambiguity avoidance, sometimes just statistical drift within a speech community. It's complex.
So while the specific Adams language label and maybe the direct survival logic connection is unique to this Odam Tili theory, the core idea that SOV is a very ancient, very fundamental structure does have some resonance within broader linguistic science.
You could say that, yes. There's overlap in acknowledging the antiquity and potential prevalence of SOV.
Now, that idea of the Turkic syntax being a living survival map, that's very evocative.
It is. It's a powerful cultural narrative embedded in this worldview. It suggests the Turkic word order isn't just grammar, but reflects a deep cultural value. maybe respect for purposeful, planned action, mirroring how ancient nomadic cultures, perhaps, meticulously plan their movements and lives.
That makes sense. But one might wonder, does the theory address if there are any situations where maybe an SVO structure like English might actually be more efficient, or perhaps better suited for modern complex communication? Or is SOV always presented as the ideal?
The sources you provided really emphasize the SOV structure as the natural one, deeply linked to that primal thought process. They don't seem to explore potential advantages of SVO in the same way. The focus is on SOV as this living survival map, connecting language directly to original human purpose and planning.
Wow. This has really, truly given us a fresh perspective on language today, hasn't it?
It certainly has.
We've explored this Odam-Tili theory, which challenges us to see English as potentially artificial, because it seems to veer from what the theory frames as a primal logical thought process, while Turkic languages supposedly preserve that ancient Adam's language flow.
And what we've learned, I think, suggests language is just so much more than a dry set of rules we learn in school. It seems intricately woven into our cognition, maybe even our survival instincts.
Yeah.
That concept of artificial English is really provocative. And while the sources didn't explicitly connect these dots, it makes you wonder, doesn't it?
I wonder why.
Well, if our language's structure fundamentally shapes our thought, as many linguists believe to some extent, could this historical divergence in English, this move away from SOV, maybe explain subtle differences?
Differences in how?
In how English speakers maybe instinctively approach problem solving or planning compared to, say, a native Turkic speaker whose language structure emphasizes that plan before action sequence. It's a fascinating thought to entertain.
It really is. So what does this all mean for you listening in? Maybe it invites you to consider language not just as, dead grammar rules, but as this living ancient reflection of how people organize their world simply to survive.
So maybe the next time you put a sentence together, just pause for a second. Think about the invisible logic behind it. Does it feel like it mirrors a primal plan? Or does it feel like something reshaped by centuries of linguistic evolution and cultural change? It really raises a fundamental question. Just how much of our ancient human thought process is still embedded, maybe hidden, in this specific language we happen to speak today?